The screen of my phone glowed mockingly in the darkness of my bedroom, displaying a balance I couldn't comprehend. 12:47. Just yesterday, there had been over $440,000 in my account, every penny I'd saved since I was 16. My hands trembled as I refreshed the app again and again, hoping it was just a glitch. My name is Emily, and I thought I knew what betrayal felt like. I was wrong. A notification popped up, a text from my mother. "Honey, we borrowed some money for Sarah's wedding. Don't worry, we'll pay you back once everything settles down. This is for the family's joy." The room started spinning. I grabbed my keys and drove to my parents' house, still wearing my pajamas. The lights were on despite it being 11 p.m. Through the window, I could see Mom and Sarah hunched over bridal magazines at the kitchen table, giggling like schoolgirls. I burst through the door without knocking. "What did you do?" Mom looked up, her smile faltering slightly. "Emily, what are you doing here so late?" "My money," I said, my voice cracking. "How did you even access my account?" Sarah's eyes widened. "What's going on?" "Your sister's being dramatic," Mom said, waving her hand dismissively. "We needed the money for your wedding venue deposit. The Riverside Garden books up years in advance, and they had a last-minute cancellation." $40,000. I couldn't keep the tremor from my voice. That was everything I had. "Oh, please," Mom rolled her eyes. "You're always so selfish. This is your sister's special day. Besides, you're not even dating anyone. What were you saving for?" "My future," I choked out. "My independence, maybe. My own wedding someday." The words came out in a rush. "You had no right." Dad appeared in the doorway, still in his work clothes. "What's all the shouting about?" "They stole my money," I said, turning to him. "Dad, they cleaned out my account." "Borrowed," Mom corrected, "and we're co-signers on that account, sweetheart. We've always had access." "The account I opened when I was 16, I said slowly. "The one you were supposed to remove yourselves from when I turned 18? Remember that conversation, Dad?" Dad at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Mara, we should have discussed this with Emily first." "There wasn't time!" Mom stood up, spreading her arms. "The venue needed an answer today. Do you know how many people would kill for a June wedding at Riverside Garden?" "This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for Sarah." Sarah finally spoke up, her voice small. "I didn't know it was Emily's money." "Of course you didn't," I spat. "You never have to know where anything comes from. Everything just magically appears for precious Sarah." "That's enough!" Mom slammed her hand on the table. "I won't have you ruining this special time with your jealousy. The money will be repaid after the wedding." "After the wedding?" I laughed bitterly. "With what? The money you don't have? Is that why you stole from me in the first place?" "We did not steal," Mom began, but I cut her off. "I worked 3 jobs through college. I saved every scholarship dollar. I lived on ramen while Sarah got a new car for her 20th birthday. And now you take everything I've worked for without even asking." "Emily," Dad stepped forward, reaching for my arm. "Let's talk about this rationally." I jerked away from him. "Don't touch me. You're just as bad as she is. You always stand there and let her do whatever she wants." "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't want it to be like this." "No," I said, backing toward the door. "You never want it to be like this. You just want everything handed to you and someone else to deal with the consequences." Mom followed me. "Where are you going?" "Don't be ridiculous. Come back inside and we'll discuss this like adults." I turned to face her one last time. Adults ask before taking something that doesn't belong to them. Adults respect boundaries. You're not adults. You're thieves. As I drove home, my phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from all 3 of them. I ignored them all. In my apartment, I sat in the dark, staring at the wedding invitation that had arrived last week. The elaborate script announced Sarah and Michael's perfect day at the prestigious Riverside Garden. My perfect sister, my perfect parents, their perfect lies. I picked up my phone and dialed Chloe. "I need your help with something." "It's almost midnight," my best friend answered, groggy. "What's wrong?" Everything, I said, my voice steady for the first time that night. And I'm going to make them pay for it. Chloe sat across from me at our usual coffee shop booth the next morning, her eyes wide as I showed her my empty bank account. They can't do this. It's illegal, right? Apparently they can, I said, stirring my untouched coffee. I called the bank. Since they're still co-signers, technically they had authorization. But you're 26. Why were they still on there? Because I trusted them. The words tasted bitter. I never thought they'd... My phone buzzed again, Sarah's face lighting up the screen for the 10th time that morning. I declined the call. You have to answer eventually, Chloe said gently. Watch me not. I switched my phone to silent. You know what the worst part is? Mom's already posting about the perfect venue on social media. Look. I showed Chloe my mother's Facebook post. Dreams do come true. So blessed to announce Sarah and Michael's wedding will be at the prestigious Riverside Garden. Perfect day, blessed mother, June wedding. The comments are making me sick, I said. You must be so proud. Sarah deserves nothing but the best. If they only knew. The bell above the cafe door chimed, and I froze. Dad walked in, scanning the room until he spotted me. Emily, he said, approaching our table. You're not answering your phone. Funny how that works, I retorted. Kind of like how you didn't answer when I tried calling about accessing my account yesterday. He shifted uncomfortably. I was in meetings all day, right? Important meetings, always too important to stop Mom when she goes too far. I'll leave you two to talk. Chloe started to slide out of the booth, but I grabbed her arm. Stay, please. Dad pulled up a chair. Your mother and I discussed it, and we understand you're upset. Upset? I laughed. Dad, you stole my life savings. Borrowed, he corrected automatically, then winced when I slammed my cup down. Stop saying that. You can't borrow without asking. You can't borrow what you can't repay. Where's this money supposedly coming from? He loosened his tie. We have some investments we can liquidate after the wedding. Investments? I leaned forward. What investments? Last month you were complaining about second mortgaging the house for Sarah's grad school. We'll figure it out, he said weakly. Emily, please, your sister is devastated. She's been crying all morning. Good. Don't be like that. She's your sister. And I'm your daughter. My voice cracked. Several cafe patrons turned to stare. Did either of you think about that? Did you think about what this money meant to me? Of course we did. But sometimes families make sacrifices. No. I cut him off. Sarah doesn't sacrifice. Mom doesn't sacrifice. You don't sacrifice. I'm the only one who ever has to give anything up. Dad reached across the table for my hand. I pulled back. Remember when I got into Stanford? I asked quietly. Full academic scholarship, but I still needed money for housing and books. Mom said we couldn't afford it. I went to state instead. 2 months later, Sarah got her BMW. That was different. How? I challenged. How was it different? He had no answer. Get out, I said. Emily. He stood slowly, looking older than I'd ever seen him. We love you. Both of you. Equally. That's the biggest lie you've ever told. I turned to stare out the window, refusing to watch him leave. After the bell chimed again, Chloe squeezed my hand. Are you okay? No, I said, pulling out the wedding invitation, running my finger over the embossed letters. But I will be. What are you thinking? I'm thinking about karma. I met her eyes, and how sometimes it needs a little help. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Please talk to me. I didn't know it was your money. I'll find another venue. No, you won't, I muttered, typing back. Keep the venue. You deserve your perfect day. I'll be there. Don't worry. Chloe raised an eyebrow. That's surprisingly forgiving of you. I showed her my screen where I'd pulled up Ben's Instagram profile. He was a social media manager I knew through mutual friends, and more importantly, he had over 100,000 followers. They want a perfect wedding? I smiled for the first time in 24 hours. I'll make sure everyone remembers it. The cafe bell chimed again. This time it was my mother, clutching her designer purse like a shield. I stood up, gathering my things. Not today, Mom. I've got a wedding to prepare for. You want me to do what? Ben leaned back in his chair at the trendy downtown bar, eyebrows raised. Make it go viral, I repeated, sliding my phone across the table. The bank statement was still open on the screen. I want everyone to know exactly how my sister's dream wedding is being funded. He whistled low. That's cold, Emily, even for you. Colder than stealing someone's entire savings? Fair point. He took a sip of his beer. But have you thought this through? Once something's online, it's there forever. Good. I pulled out my notebook, flipping to a fresh page. I want it to be permanent. Hey guys! A familiar voice cut through the bar's ambient noise. My stomach dropped as Michael, Sarah's fiancé, approached our table. Trent! Ben stood to give him a quick hug. Didn't expect to see you here. Just grabbing drinks with some work friends. His eyes landed on me. Emily, perfect timing. Sarah's been trying to reach you. I've been busy, I said flatly. Listen, he pulled up a chair, uninvited. I heard about what happened with the money. I had no idea. Save it, I cut him off. You're just as bad as she is, living in your fantasy world where everything works out perfectly because someone else pays the price. His face reddened. That's not fair. I offered to help pay for the venue when I found out. With what? I laughed. Your entry-level salary, the same one you used to justify Sarah paying for your dates all through college? Emily, Ben warned. No, let her finish, Michael said, jaw tight. Clearly she's been holding on to this for a while. You're damn right I have. I leaned forward. You've been living off my sister's allowance for years, and now you're living off my stolen savings. You're a parasite, Michael. He stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. I came here to make peace. Sarah's devastated. Your parents are trying to make it right. Why can't you just... Just what? I interrupted, my voice deadly quiet. Roll over? Accept it like I always do? Maybe if you weren't so bitter about everything, get out, I said, my voice low and dangerous. Before I start telling everyone here exactly what kind of man you are. He left without another word. Ben waited until he was gone before speaking. Well, that was intense. He deserved it. Maybe? Ben picked up my phone again. But you might want to be more careful. Element of surprise and all that. He had a point. I took a deep breath, refocusing. So, will you help me? I don't know, Emily. This is pretty nuclear. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Drop whatever you're planning. Some things should stay in the family. I showed it to Ben. See? They're already trying to silence me. He frowned. Who sent that? Probably one of Mom's country club friends. She's been telling everyone I'm having a mental episode. I rolled my eyes. Classic deflection. What exactly do you want to do? I pulled out the wedding invitation. June 15th, Riverside Garden. I'm going to stand up during the ceremony and tell everyone exactly how this wedding was funded. I want you to make sure it spreads beyond just the guests. That's specific. I've had time to think about it. I showed him my notes. I'll need multiple camera angles, live streaming capabilities, maybe even... Emily? A soft voice interrupted. I looked up to see Chloe, who was supposed to meet us later. You're early, I said. Yeah, she said, sitting down, looking troubled. I just came from your parents' house. My stomach clenched. Why were you there? Sarah called me. She's a mess, Emily. She's talking about canceling the wedding. Good. Is it? Chloe challenged. Will that get your money back? Will it make you feel better? Yes, I said, but my voice wavered. You're lying. She reached for my hand. I know you're hurt. You have every right to be, but this path you're on... Don't. I pulled away. Don't try to talk me out of this. I'm not. I'm asking you to think about what happens after. When the video goes viral, when the family's torn apart, when there's no going back. What then? My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. Last warning. Back off. I showed it to them both. See? They're threatening me now. Still think I should back down? Ben and Chloe exchanged looks. Actually, Ben said slowly, this might work in our favor. Keep those texts. Document everything. If we're going to do this, let's do it right. I smiled, feeling the first flutter of victory. So, you'll help? He nodded. But we do this my way. Professional. Calculated. No emotional outbursts. Deal. I raised my glass. To karma. To karma, he echoed. But Chloe remained silent, watching me with worried eyes. I ignored her concern. There was no turning back now. Are you sure about this? Ben asked, adjusting the tiny camera hidden in what looked like a normal brooch. Once we start, there's no going back. We were sitting in his home office, surrounded by various pieces of recording equipment. 3 weeks had passed since the confrontation at the bar, and the wedding was now just 10 days away. I'm sure. I pinned the brooch to my jacket, checking its position in the mirror. How's the audio quality? Crystal clear. He played back a test recording. But, Emily, these threatening texts you've been getting, maybe we should report them. I shook my head. They're just trying to scare me. Besides, we need them for the story. My phone lit up with another message from Sarah. Just picked up my dress. Wish you'd been there. Miss you. I ignored it, just like I'd ignored the dozens before it. The bridal shower invitation, the rehearsal dinner details, the desperate voicemails. Your sister's really trying, Ben observed, watching me delete the message. She's really trying to pretend everything's normal, I corrected. Just like always. The doorbell rang. Ben checked his security camera feed. It's your dad. What? I grabbed the documents Chloe had given me, shoving them into my bag. How did he know I was here? Probably followed me, Chloe admitted. I saw his car earlier but thought I lost him. The knocking grew louder. Emily, I know you're in there. Please, we need to talk. Ben pointed to his back door. Go. I'll handle him. I slipped out just as Ben opened the front door. From around the corner, I heard my father's voice. Where is she, Mr. Graham? This is private property, Ben said firmly. She's my daughter who clearly doesn't want to speak with you. I texted Chloe. Meet me at our backup location. 20 minutes later, we regrouped at a small cafe across town. Ben joined us shortly after. Your dad's gone, he reported, but he left this. He handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a note. It's a start. Please let us make this right. I ripped both in half. Emily, Chloe protested. It's not about the money anymore, I said. It's about the lies, the manipulation, everything they've hidden for years while pretending to be the perfect family. Speaking of hiding, Ben pulled out his laptop. I've got the live stream set up. Ready. Multiple platforms, impossible to shut down completely. The moment you start talking, it'll go live. I nodded, touching the brooch. Good. And the audio? Crystal clear, like I said. But he hesitated. Are you absolutely sure you want to do this? It's not too late to back out. My phone buzzed with another anonymous text. Final chance. Walk away or face the consequences. I showed them the message. See? They're still trying to control me, still trying to silence me. Well, not anymore. I stood up, gathering my things. The rehearsal dinner is in 3 days. I need you both there, testing the equipment, making sure everything works perfectly. And then? Chloe asked quietly. And then, I smiled grimly. My sister gets exactly the wedding day she deserves. As I walked out, I heard Chloe whisper to Ben, I'm scared for her. I'm scared for all of them. He replied, They should be, I thought. The perfect family was about to get a very public wake-up call. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear. Perfect weather for destroying my family's reputation. I stood in front of my mirror, adjusting the pale blue bridesmaid's dress Sarah had chosen months ago. The brooch camera was hidden perfectly among the beading. My phone lit up with a text from Ben. Equipment check at 9. Don't be late. I grabbed my purse and headed for the door, only to find Chloe waiting in the hallway. You shouldn't be alone today, she said simply. The drive to Riverside Garden was silent. The venue looked like something from a fairy tale, with its manicured lawns and cascading flower arrangements. A banner across the entrance read, "Sarah and Michael's perfect day." Subtle, I muttered. Ben met us at the side entrance, laptop in hand. Testing. Testing. Camera 1, say something. I hate everything about this place. Audio's perfect. He checked his screen. Camera 2. Chloe touched her necklace, another hidden camera. Testing. All systems go. Ben looked up. Last chance to back out. Before I could respond, my mother's voice rang out across the garden. Emily. There you are! She hurried over, perfect makeup already in place, designer dress rustling. Why aren't you at the bridal suite? Sarah's been asking for you. I needed some air. Well, come on! She grabbed my arm. The photographer wants pictures of the sisters getting ready together. I caught Ben's eye. He nodded slightly. The cameras were rolling. The bridal suite was chaos, makeup artists, hairdressers, and Sarah in the middle of it all, looking like a princess in her expensive dress. My stolen savings wrapped in white silk and lace. Emily! She jumped up, eyes watery. You came. I'm a bridesmaid, aren't I? She hugged me tight. I've missed you so much. I'm so sorry about everything. Are you? I pulled back. Or are you just sorry I found out? Girls, Mom warned. Not today, right? I smiled coldly. Today's perfect. Just like everything else in Sarah's life. The makeup artist approached with her brush ready for touch-ups. I'll do my own, I said quickly, not wanting anyone to notice the brooch. Sarah caught my arm as I turned away. Can we talk? Please, just for a minute. I followed her to a private corner, aware of the camera recording every moment. I tried to give it back, she whispered. The venue deposit, but they said it was non-refundable. How convenient. I'm serious. I feel terrible. Michael and I even talked about postponing, but you didn't. Mom said it would be a waste of my money. She flinched. That's not fair. None of this is fair, Sarah, but you're still going through with it. Because I love him. Tears welled in her eyes. And I love you. You're my sister. Please don't let this ruin everything. For a moment, just a moment, I wavered. Then my phone buzzed. Another anonymous text. Last warning. Don't do this to your family. My resolve hardened. You should finish getting ready. Wouldn't want to ruin your perfect makeup. The next few hours passed in a blur of photographs, last-minute adjustments, and carefully orchestrated moments. Mom kept trying to create picture-perfect scenes of sisterly love, while Dad hovered anxiously in the background. Finally, guests began arriving. I watched from a window as Ben and Chloe took their strategic positions, one near the front, one in the middle, both with clear views of the altar. 5 minutes, the wedding coordinator called out. Sarah appeared beside me, radiant in her final moments of preparation. How do I look? Like $40,000, I said quietly. She paled. Emily. Places, everyone. The coordinator clapped her hands. Bridesmaids, line up. As we took our positions, I felt my phone buzz one last time. Not an anonymous threat this time, but a message from Dad. Whatever you're planning, please remember you can't take it back. I deleted it without responding. The wedding march began to play. One by one, we processed down the aisle. I could feel Mom beaming from the front row, Dad looking nervous beside her. Ben gave me a subtle nod as I passed. Chloe wouldn't meet my eyes. I took my place at the altar, watching Sarah float down the aisle on Dad's arm. She looked beautiful, perfect, everything she'd always been, and I'd never managed to become. The minister began to speak. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. My hand touched the brooch. In moments, everything would change. The perfect family would shatter. The perfect wedding would become a viral scandal. If anyone has any reason why these two should not be joined in marriage. I took a deep breath. This was it. My moment of truth. Sarah turned slightly, catching my eye for the first time in weeks. I really looked at my sister, and what I saw made me hesitate, but only for a moment. Actually, I stepped forward, my voice carrying across the suddenly silent church. I do have a reason. Sarah's face crumpled. Emily, please. Everyone here thinks this is a perfect wedding, I continued, my voice growing stronger. A perfect couple, a perfect family, but it's all built on lies. Mom stood up. Emily, stop this right now. No, Mom, I won't stop. Not anymore. I turned to address the guests directly. You want to know how this perfect wedding was funded? With stolen money, my money. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I could see Ben's red recording light blinking steadily. $40,000, I announced. Every penny I'd saved since I was 16. They took it all without asking, without permission to pay for this. I gestured at the elaborate decorations. Because heaven forbid Sarah doesn't get exactly what she wants. That's enough. Dad started moving toward me. Is it? I pulled out the bank statements Chloe had found. Should we talk about the second mortgage? The maxed out credit cards? All to maintain this perfect image? Security! Mom called out. Two men in black suits started moving up the aisle. Go ahead, I laughed. Remove me. But you can't remove the truth. This whole thing is streaming live right now. Gasps echoed through the church. Phones started appearing in people's hands, already searching for the feed. She's lying, Mom announced desperately. She's just jealous of her sister's happiness. Am I? I pulled out my phone, projecting screenshots of my bank account onto the wall using the church's presentation system, Ben's technical setup working perfectly. Here's my account before and after, the same day they booked this venue. Michael stepped forward. Sarah, did you know about this? Sarah's perfect makeup was streaking with tears. I didn't know at first. When I found out... She knew. I cut in. She always knows. She just pretends not to see the damage she causes. The security guards reached me. One grabbed my arm. Touch me, and it gets worse, I warned. I have years of evidence. Every time they chose her over me. Every sacrifice I was forced to make while she got everything. Stop! Sarah screamed. She ripped off her veil. Just stop! You're right, okay? You're right about everything. The church fell silent. I knew, she continued, voice shaking. I knew they took your money. I knew it was wrong. But I was scared to say no to Mom. Scared to be anything less than perfect. Scared to disappoint everyone. Like you always did. Mom gasped. Sarah, no. Mom, Emily's right, right? We're frauds, all of us. Sarah turned to Michael. I'm sorry. I can't do this. I can't start our marriage with stolen money and lies. Michael stared at her for a long moment, then walked out without a word. The church erupted in chaos. Do you see what you've done? Mom advanced on me, face contorted with rage. You've ruined everything. No, Mom, you did that. The moment you decided your image was worth more than your daughter's future. Dad finally spoke up. She's right, Mara. This has to stop. John, don't you dare! I'm done enabling this. He turned to the guests. My daughter is telling the truth. We stole her money. We've been living a lie, and I'm ashamed. The security guards released me, clearly unsure what to do in this situation. Phones were recording everywhere now. I could practically see the social media storm brewing. Caroline! Sarah approached me, mascara streaking down her face. I know it's too late, but I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I looked at my sister, really looked at her. Behind the perfect facade, I saw something I'd never noticed before. Fear. The same fear I'd lived with my whole life, of never being enough. It's not too late, I said quietly. It's just the truth. Finally. Mom collapsed into a pew, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. Dad sat beside her, looking both defeated and relieved. Ben appeared at my side. It's trending already. Top story on 3 platforms. Chloe joined us, her camera still recording. What now? I looked around at the destroyed wedding, the shocked guests, my broken family. The perfect day shattered by truth. Now, I said, unpinning the brooch camera. We stop pretending. I walked down the aisle, past the whispers and stares, past the scattered rose petals and abandoned programs. At the door, I turned back one last time. Sarah stood alone at the altar, still in her perfect dress, looking more real than she ever had before. Mom sobbed in the front pew while Dad stared straight ahead. The perfect family, finally exposed. I stepped out into the sunlight, feeling lighter than I had in years. The truth had cost me my family, but lies had already done that long ago. At least now everyone knew it. Story 2. I'm Jennifer Chen. Hello. My parents taught me as a child that hard effort and humility are the keys to real prosperity. I was fascinated by the financial market, whereas other children aspired to become physicians or attorneys. To the astonishment of my parents, I started reading investing books and compulsively following market patterns by the time I was 12. Perhaps you ought to get out with your buddies more, my dear. My mother would advise me to look at piles of financial records. Mom, I'm having fun with this. I would respond without raising my gaze. Did you know that at the age of 11, Warren Buffett purchased his first stock? She shook her head and laughed. Just swear to me that while you're building your empire, you won't forget to live. As my pastime developed into a passion and then into skill, it became more difficult to fulfill that commitment. By the time I was 16, I was using my allowance and savings to manage a small portfolio, so being awarded a full scholarship to Harvard to study finance felt like fate. Michael and I met. Charming and ambitious, he was pursuing a degree in business administration with the goal of moving up the corporate ladder. We were grabbing for the same economics textbook when we first met during finals week. He smiled warmly and replied, "Ladies first." I chuckled. "Regards. My name is Jennifer Michael. We might study together, perhaps." What started out as a study session turned into frequent coffee dates, and eventually a relationship that was unlike any other I had ever experienced. Michael thought I was ambitious. He would observe me analyze market patterns and declare, "You're going to rule the business world. Any business would be fortunate to have you on board." He was unaware that I had no intention of working for anybody else. Everything was covered by my scholarship, so I invested my profits. My portfolio had increased significantly by the time I graduated. However, I said nothing. Success on my terms was what I want, not like the trust money girl. Michael secured a prominent position at Boston's Sterling Industries, a significant IT company. Michael was dubious when I turned down many high-profile opportunities, even though I had decided to work on my own. "Are you certain?" he inquired. "These are fantastic chances." I smiled and said, "I have my own plans." Believe me, we were married in a low-key ceremony a year later. Patricia, Michael's mother, wasn't quite happy with my choice of profession. "Consultancy for investments," she would smirk. "Is that a job at all?" I grinned, remembering my parents' counsel to maintain your modesty. Although no one, not even Michael, knew, my portfolio was intelligently diversified, valued over $50 million, and I was one of Sterling's biggest individual shareholders. Michael flourished at Sterling, moving up the ranks to serve under the haughty VP of Operations, James Wilson. Wilson was notorious for his antiquated beliefs, particularly in regard to women. He would argue that women forgetting their role is the issue with contemporary marriages. Michael would chuckle uncomfortably to avoid conflict. Even though it annoyed me, I ignored it until the yearly executive party. As a significant stakeholder, I had an interest in going to Sterling's restructuring plans. "Do you really want to attend?" Michael inquired. "For those who are not employees, these events may be boring. I believe it's time for me to examine your work more closely," I answered, putting on my makeup with care. I wore a timeless black dress, pearl earrings, a talisman, and my grandmother's old watch, along with all of my important choices. As we arrived, the hotel ballroom was a hive of activity. The aroma of champagne permeated the air, and crystal chandeliers glistened above. James Wilson was gripping Courtney of the bar when Michael took me to him. Jennifer. Michael James raised his glass and called. We were just talking about Sterling's innovative new course, which involves reducing RD to increase short-term earnings. I pretended to be innocent as I inquired. Isn't sustainable growth fueled by innovation? James paused his smile. On business, the tiny wife has opinions, does she? The gang erupts in laughter. Michael made an uncomfortable change. She enjoys reading financial news, he said hastily. Perhaps we should have some beverages, honey. James wasn't finished, though. Sterling loudly declared that his biggest issue was the abundance of voices from people who don't understand real business, such as housewives, who believe they are experts because they read the Wall Street Journal. While the audience laughed, I saw Thomas Richards, the CEO, observing with curiosity. Once, before I could say anything, my husband, who was so proud of my intelligence, looked at his shoes. A well-known voice cut in. Well, James, you may want to reconsider that. My confidant and private banker, Sarah Martinez, came forward. Her smile was piercing. Jennifer, should I explain? Or do you want to? James's arrogant face wavered. What's happening? My grandmother's watch pressed against my wrist as I straightened. The moment had arrived, because shareholder value is your top priority. James, I said in a composed tone. Maybe we should talk about the report I'm bringing to the board meeting on Monday, the one explaining why your plan for restructuring will not work. At the Crimson board meeting, James turned red. What are you discussing? Richards, the CEO, came forward. His face was thoughtful. JSI Holdings, Jennifer Chin. The name sounded familiar to me. I grinned. Surprise. Strategic anonymity can be a powerful tool. What's going on? Michael whispered, his face pale and voice trembling. Sarah stepped forward, her tone cutting through the silence. Your wife? She announced to the room, under 51% of Sterling Industry shares. And now she doesn't spend her days shopping. The silence hung for a moment before chaos erupted. James Wilson's face turned a vivid red, cycling through shades I didn't know were possible. Michael looked as though he might faint. This is absurd, James sputtered. There must be some mistake Sarah ever composed. Tapped on her tablet. I can show you the documentation if you like. I have all the records right here. CEO Richard stepped forward, a slight smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. That won't be necessary, Sarah. I suspected as much for some time. The board has been impressed with Mrs. Chan's insights and recommendations for years. James turned to him, stunned. You knew? Of course, Richards replied smoothly. Why do you think your restructuring plan hasn't been approved? Mrs. Chen raised significant objections. Michael finally found his voice, though it wavered. Jennifer? How? When I met his wide-eyed gaze, perhaps we should continue this conversation somewhere more private, I suggested, glancing at the growing crowd of onlookers. My office is just upstairs, Richards offered. Shall we? The elevator ride was oppressively silent. Michael alternated between glancing at me and staring at the floor while James seethed. Sarah, steady as ever, stood by my side, a quiet but unwavering presence. Richard's office was expansive, with panoramic views of the Boston skyline. As we took our seats, James immediately claimed the chair nearest Richard's desk, as if proximity could restore his authority, while Richards began leaning back in his chair. This has been an eventful evening. Eventful, James exploded. This is outrageous. She can't possibly. She can and does, Sarah interrupted, laying documents on the desk. Jennifer Chen, through carefully managed investment vehicles, controls 51% of Sterling Industries. She's been building her position over the past 5 years. Michael's expression morphed from confusion to hurt. 5 years. But we've been married for 3. I started investing in Sterling before we met. I explained evenly the company had potential, but needed modernization. I saw an opportunity. Modernization, James sneered. Yes, James, I replied calmly. Modernization. Like fostering innovation instead of getting RD. Like respecting your employees instead of perpetuating a toxic workplace. Richards leaned forward. Mrs. Chen's recommendations have been instrumental in shaping our strategy. Her analysis has consistently outperformed expectations. Michael's voice was barely audible. Why didn't you tell me? I held his gaze. Would it have made a difference? Would you have defended me against James's comments if he'd known I was Sterling's majority shareholder? He flinched, the answer clear without being spoken. This is preposterous, James barked, rising from his chair. I've dedicated 15 years to Sterling. You can't just turn it into a toxic environment where innovation and talent are stifled. I interrupted James. Your restructuring plan would destroy this company. The board won't be supporting it. Richards cut in. In fact, we need to discuss your future with Sterling. My future? James looked stricken. Indeed, I said, standing to meet his glare. Your leadership is outdated, your strategies are short-sighted, and your conduct unacceptable. Sterling deserves better. You can't fire me, James shouted. You're just a majority shareholder, Sarah interjected coolly. And yes, she can. Michael remained frozen, his expression unreadable. You told me you were consulting, he murmured. You said it was small scale. I never lied. I said softly, I just didn't tell you everything. Would you have respected my decisions if I had? James erupted again, pointing at Michael. She's tearing us apart. Women like her. That's enough. Richard snapped his tone. Shock. James, you'll receive the details of your separation package tomorrow. Please leave. James stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Sarah excused herself, leaving me alone with Michael and Richards. Mrs. Chen, Richards began, will you be taking a more active role in the company? Yes, I replied firmly, starting with a comprehensive review of our culture and leadership. Michael finally spoke, his voice cracking. And what about us? I turned to him, my voice steady. That depends. Are you ready to see me as an equal? Or am I still just the little wife you asked to stay quiet at? Company events. I need time, he said, standing abruptly. This is all too much. He left, and I watched his retreating figure. Richards cleared his throat. Family and business rarely mix well. True, I said, exhaling deeply. But principles shouldn't be compromised. The days that followed were a whirlwind. James's firing made headlines. Sterling Industries a shakeup at the top. The stock price dipped briefly before recovering as my vision for the company became public. Michael stayed with his parents, processing everything. His mother left a string of hostile voicemails, which I deleted without hesitation. My focus remained on transforming Sterling, revitalizing R&D, implementing work-life balance policies, and fostering innovation. A week later, Michael returned. He looked worn, his usual polish replaced by exhaustion. Can we talk? He asked hesitantly. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. He sat, then immediately stood again, pacing nervously. I've been thinking about everything, he began. About us. About work, and I prompted. I was wrong, he admitted, his voice low. I let James and others disrespect you. I should have stood up for you. I was so focused on my career that I forgot what really matters. I regarded him for a bit before answering. Change doesn't happen via words, Michael. It comes via deeds. Are you ready to show me that you consider me as your equal? He nodded, resolve blazing in his eyes. Yes, I am. I waited silently, allowing him space to continue. But you weren't fully honest either. Michael added after a time. You kept such a significant chunk of your life concealed from me. How are we expected to have a true marriage with secrets like that? You're correct, I admitted, keeping my voice cool. I should have trusted you with the truth. But Michael, ask yourself, why didn't I believe I could? He slid into the chair, his hands raking over his hair. Because I showed you I couldn't be trusted. Every time I smiled at James's jokes, every time I urged you to remain quiet, I demonstrated I cared more about office politics than supporting my wife. My marriage, my determination, and my capacity to lead Sterling Industries through significant change were all put to the test over the course of the following several weeks. James Wilson had not left in silence. His buddies within the workplace whispered behind my back that he had engaged a lawyer and threatened to sue for wrongful termination. They whispered in the break room, "She's destroying our traditions." This is the result of allowing feelings to control a business. Facts don't lie, yet others scoffed. In a month, employee satisfaction increased by 40%, and RD submitted 12 patent applications after being released from James's suffocating hold. The steady increase in the stock price demonstrated that my modifications were not only drastic, they were required. Michael hung in a weird limbo at home, being cautious around me and sleeping in the guest room. But Patricia, his mother, did not hesitate in the same way. One afternoon, her high-end shoes clicking like gunshots, she barged into our home. "We must speak," she said, hardly stopping before entering the living room. "Of course," dryly I murmured as I shut the door after her. "You've gone too far with this power trip," she said, folding her arms. "Your point has been made. Now take a back seat and let the men do the work." I arched an eyebrow. "The males. Michael has been humiliated by you. Already enough," she yelled. "His co-workers no longer know how to handle him. Are you aware of the impact this is having on his career?" I repeated in embarrassment, similar to being made fun of at business events, like being written off as only a homemaker. "That's not the same." She dismissively waved a manicured hand. "That's the nature of business. Men must. What is required?" Patricia denigrated women in order to boost their self-esteem. If competence comes from the incorrect gender, act as though it doesn't exist. She exploded because you had deceived him. "My son thought you were a typical wife when he married you. And now? What comes next?" Michael's words broke the tense silence. "Michael is also Starling." Patricia's face softened with relief as she turned to face him. "I'm glad to have you here. Before she ruins everything, we must reason with her." Michael, however, was not observing her. For something I hadn't seen in weeks, his gaze was fixed on me. "Understanding," he responded calmly. "Ma'am, you must go." "What?" "Now, however," he stated firmly, upon her departure. Between us, silence descended. Michael flopped down on the sofa. His face was etched with exhaustion. He murmured softly, "I heard everything, and it dawned on me that I had been exactly like her, treating you as though he needed to be controlled rather than encouraged. I apologize as well." I took a seat next to him but kept a safe distance. "Michael, I didn't want to overshadow you. All I wanted was your respect as your spouse, partner, and individual. You've got it." Softly, he said, "I want to gain your trust even though I know I don't now deserve it. I adore you, not because of your wealth or influence, and I want to be the companion you are worthy of." The moment was interrupted when my phone chimed. Sarah was the one. When I replied, she responded, "Jennifer, James's lawsuit has been withdrawn. Sterling's most recent quarterly estimates have caused concern, and they're impressive. Give me the information." I smiled as I spoke. "And thanks for everything, Sarah," Michael inquired after I hung up. "Good news. James is giving in," I attested. "Success appears to be the finest kind of retaliation." Michael gave a contemplative nod. "What is going on with us and Sterling now?" "Sterling will continue to change. We're starting a mentorship program for women in tech next month, and we're implementing a new parental leave policy," I said. "And us?" With hesitation in his voice, he inquired. I inhaled deeply. "It depends. Are you prepared for an equal marriage? Are you really prepared? I want to try." He began by leaving the guest room, a tiny smile pulling at his lips. "If that's acceptable to you, it's killing my back." To my surprise, I chuckled. "You'll have to confront your mother, and we'll need couples counseling." He smiled and replied, "Done. But perhaps we might get together for supper the following week." When you describe your women's leadership effort, I would want to see her face. I had genuine hope for our future for the first time in weeks. Story 3. I never imagined that I would be telling this tale, but now that I am 30 years old, I am at last prepared to do so. I'm Erica, and when I was 13, this is how my life was irrevocably altered. We were what you would call a typical family back then. Mom, Dad, and I live alone in our comfortable home on Maple Street. Mom was a part-time bookkeeper, and Dad was a construction worker. Despite our lack of wealth, we were content. When Dad got into his accident, everything went apart. On a typical Tuesday morning, He was on his way to work 1 minute. What about the next one? He was gone, all right. As simple as that. Mom broke down. Fell apart altogether. She would gaze at nothing for hours on end. I also had to quickly learn how to take care of myself. One evening, around 6 months after Dad's death, Erica remarked to me, "Honey, I have something essential to tell you." As usual when she was anxious, she was fiddling with her coffee cup while seated at our kitchen table. Someone I met. He goes by the name Robert. He brings me joy once more. I ought to have anticipated it. Really? The late-night phone calls make her suddenly worry about how she looks once more. She had to conduct an enigmatic errand. However, it still seemed like a kick in the gut when she informed me that Robert and his 6-year-old daughter, Sarah, would be moving in with us. But I objected. "Mom, Dad was just gone 6 months ago. Sweetheart, I am aware." She interrupted me, adopting the severe tone of voice I had begun to hear more frequently. However, life continues. Sarah needs a mother figure, and Robert is a decent man. We can reunite as a family, a household. That's the name she gave it. 2 weeks later, Robert moved in with his daughter and boxes of belongings, and she saw our house as if it were a palace straight out of a fairy tale. Sarah was a little girl with large blue eyes and blonde pigtails. My mother had always wished for a pretty young daughter like this one. "Erica, look at her." Watching Sarah color or play with her toys, Mom would comment, "She is precious, isn't she? At this age, she requires a great deal of love and care." Yes, she need care. My mother was more than willing to give it all. She seemed to have all she had, leaving nothing for me. I became invisible as my mother changed into the ideal stepmother for Sarah, and I watched. Dinner was the first time I truly grasped how things would work. A week or so after they had moved in, Robert's mother had visited this woman who would end up being my worst enemy. After glancing at me, she said, "Oh, you're such a big girl." She then leaned over and gave me a really painful squeeze on my cheek that made me want to scream. What a lovely face. She described how her fingers dug like claws into my flesh. "Robert, although, this place would be ideal." Death. She didn't have to, but she didn't continue the statement. I could see how she gazed at me, as if I were a discoloration on her son's brand new flawless family photo. She had squeezed me that night, and I discovered bruises on my cheeks. However, Mom simply shook her head when I attempted to show her. During my time as a mother, life did not settle into a pattern. Sarah and Robert developed into a flawless little team that always worked together, going to the park, hosting movie evenings, or simply chatting over dinner and making goofy jokes about Sarah. In the meanwhile, I was frequently hauled off to the home of Mom's friend Janet. "Erica, sweetheart," Mom would say, avoiding eye contact. "Today, Janet needs assistance with tiny Emily. I take it you don't mind." At least someone appeared pleased to see me when I went to Janet's place. With her lively curls and a gap-toothed smile that could light up a room, Emily was 4 years old and utterly charming. As soon as I went through the door, she would come to me, shouting, "Eerie, eerie." The best part of my days was really playing with Emily. I would make all the goofy voices in stories we read, host tea parties with her stuffed animals, or construct blanket forts. Janet would join us, offer refreshments, and occasionally inquire about school while paying attention to my responses. Family should feel at home, and it seemed normal. The story was different. Mrs. Henderson, Robert's mother, had all but moved in. At least that's how it felt. Every time she suggested new paint colors, moved furniture, or offered criticism on the drapes, Mom delighted at the chance to implement the modification. She would remark that these walls should be eggshell rather than cream. The next thing you know, Mom is selecting paint samples at the hardware store. For improved feng shui, the furniture in the living room has to be moved. Mom would spend the entire weekend moving bulky furniture because she insisted on it. I was still being tormented by her favorite pastime, though. I felt my skin bursting as she squeezed my cheeks between her bony fingers. She would squeeze harder and add, "I see you're still not holding your fork properly." Such bad etiquette at the table. Your mother ought to have given you greater instruction. Or she would see me on the couch reading. "Take a look at how slouched she is. It makes sense why her posture is so bad." Squeezed. My Sarah will never be seen sitting like that. Robert, in his own way, was as awful. He would blow up if I dropped a plate or knocked over a glass while cleaning the dishes. Are you aware of the price? His face would flush as he screamed. You don't, of course. Have you never in your life earned a single dollar? Merely a freeloader who benefits from my labor. I apologize. I would mumble as I attempted to fix whatever I had damaged. Apologies. Doesn't it replace things? He would go on. You live in my home, eat my food, and wear clothes that I have paid for. What do you contribute to? Nothing. Simply make messes and break things. Every time something similar occurred, I would turn to my mother in the hopes that she would speak. Anything. However, she would pretend not to hear and occupy herself with cleaning or fussing with Sarah. On my 16th birthday, I made up my mind. I would no longer be Robert's freeloader. That morning, I woke up early and went around the neighborhood handing out flyers I had made about my dog walking services. I had 3 clients lined up by the afternoon. Do you wish to take dogs on walks? 2 streets over, Mrs. Peterson. When I knocked on her door, she asked, How come you teens have so much homework these days? I can manage both, I assured her, attempting to sound more confident than I felt. I earn high marks and I'm very responsible with animals. She looked hesitant, but handed up her golden retriever's leash. Anyway. All right, let's give it a shot. Max needs a stroll every day after school, $10 per stroll. That was only the beginning. Considering I was walking 5 different dogs, babysitting the Martinez twins on weekends, and assisting old Mr. Cooper with his grocery shopping, Janet formally hired me as Emily's after-school nanny, which seemed funny considering I've been watching her for free all this time. Anyway, I didn't spend any money on movies, sweets, or anything else that other kids my age did. 3 months later, I had enough money to purchase the smartphone of my dreams. Just a simple model for sale, nothing special. It was mine, though. I was beaming the entire day I got it home. No one could claim to have paid for something that was exclusively mine. Sarah stormed in without knocking when I was in my room putting up the phone. As usual. What is that? She pointed at my phone and demanded. She had developed the tendency of desiring everything she saw, and she was now 9 years old. I tried to seem impartial as I said, It's my new phone. I used money from my employment to purchase it. Sarah's gaze widened. However, I'd want a phone. Dad. She ran downstairs and screamed for Robert before I could stop her. My stomach fell when I heard his heavy footsteps on the stairs. Princess, what's wrong? From my doorway, he inquired. I want the phone that Erica has. Sarah whimpered and pointed accusingly at me. The thought of what transpired next still makes my blood boil. Not a word. Not a word. Robert came over, took the phone from me, and handed it to Sarah. Daddy has you covered, my love. Ignoring me entirely, he murmured to her. I was so furious that my vision was blurry. I told my English teacher, Mrs. Collins, everything about the phone, Robert's persistent taunting, and my mother's lack of interest the following day at school. After giving me a silent ear, she led me to the principal's office. Mom was called in by that afternoon. I heard rising shouts even though I wasn't there at the meeting. Mom had my phone in her hand when she walked out, but her face was crimson with rage. She didn't glance at me before thrusting at me. With her jaws clenched, she murmured, Here. I hope you're content right now. Mom arrived to my room that evening after Sarah had been crying for hours about losing her phone. You dare? She gave a hiss. You have no right to act in such a way behind our backs. How humiliating was that, do you know? All you are is a traitor. She didn't speak to me again for 2 weeks after that. Robert and she both acted as though I didn't exist. Ignoring me as if I didn't exist. Chatting as if I weren't there. They wouldn't even acknowledge me as they passed plates by me during supper. The 2 years that went by were essentially the same. I worked at my jobs, tried to stay at home, and concentrated on my studies. Knowing that knowledge was my ticket out, I immersed myself into my studies. I applied for every scholarship I could find when my senior year rolled around. I was so anxious that I almost puked on the day the letter from State College came. I didn't open it till I was by myself in my room. I could hardly rip the envelope since my hands were shaking so much. We are happy to notify you, Miss Thompson. It took 3 readings for it to sink in full scholarship. I was receiving a full scholarship from them. I had succeeded. I wouldn't need to ask Robert for money because I was going to college. Like a fool. Perhaps this would make them proud, I reasoned. Mom could eventually see me again because of this. I waited until everyone was seated around the table for supper that evening. Mom, I have some wonderful news, Robert. My heart began to race. State College welcomed me. What? Robert's dish clattered as his fork struck it. You didn't inform me when you applied to college. Who are you, in your opinion, making decisions like these behind my back, eating my food, and living in my home? It's a full scholarship, though. I made an effort to clarify. There won't be any fees for you. I wouldn't pay anything, damn you. He spit. For a resentful freeloader like you, not a single dime. Constantly skulking, constantly planning something. Desperately, I glanced at Mom. She was using her fork to move food around while gazing at her plate. I begged you, Mom. Say anything, please. How come you don't defend me? When she did glance up, her eyes were icy. Why ought I to? You've never treated this family with any deference. Robert has never been accepted by you. You have just attempted to ruin my marriage from the beginning. Show respect. Something inside of me snapped. Anger and anguish from all the years poured out. Show him respect. He is a horrible person and a bully. Nothing is worthy of respect. The smack was unexpected. A single second. Anger was trembling me as I stood there. The next time, Mom was standing in front of me and my face was hurting. She continued to hold out her hand. Leave, she muttered, then more loudly. Leave my house. I stroked the spot where she struck me on the face. I had the impression that I was in a bad dream. In a haze, I grabbed my backpack and crammed it full of whatever clothing I could find as I hurried upstairs. My phone, my school papers, and the small amount of money I had saved. The others would have to remain. Downstairs, I could hear Robert shouting and Sarah laughing, but it all sounded distant. I was standing on Jenny's front doorstep 10 minutes later. My biology classmate, Jenny. When she answered the door and saw my face, the backpack, and the tears I hadn't even noticed were streaming down my face. She was the only person I could think to contact. There were no inquiries from her. She simply drew me in and gave me a hug. I was anxious about how I would handle college while practically homeless as I sat in Jenny's kitchen, when Aunt Maria entered the room. Jenny has been telling me about a girl named you, she remarked, glancing up and down at me. Do you need a job? It turned out that Maria had an empty studio apartment above her small downtown Italian restaurant. She offered me flexible hours around her classes and complimentary lunches before I realized what was going on. Like it was no big deal, she said. The flat is secure and tidy, however it needs some maintenance. I learned everything I could about the industry while working as a waiter. Maria was fair yet firm, teaching me topics that I would never have learned in my college business courses. Observe how the food continues returning from that table. That's why we record every complaint, she would say. Every praise. In our business, details are important. It was a little apartment, hardly enough space for a bed and a small refrigerator. It was mine, though. No, it was Robert who was shouting about freeloaders. No, Sarah shouldn't enter without knocking on the mail, Mrs. Henderson's penetrating gaze. I just needed a place of my own to study, sleep, and, at last, breathe. Maria elevated me to administrator by my senior year. On a Saturday, I received my business degree, and on Monday morning, I returned to work. Currently managing workers, inventories, and scheduling. 2 years later, after I had risen to the position of manager, Maria informed me, "You have a gift for this." She appeared content, yet exhausted as she sat in her office. According to Jenny, you two have been discussing a collaboration. I moved uneasily in my seat. We have spoken about it, but it's excellent. Since I'm retiring, she interrupted me. Jenny is getting a restaurant, but she wants someone who is well-versed in this industry. Someone similar to you. My heart almost stopped. Are you saying? You two ought to manage this place jointly, I'm suggesting. Equal partners. You have the expertise. She is passionate. It may make a potent mix. I spent the entire night discussing it with Jenny. I saved as much money as I could during the previous few years. She also made suggestions for growing the company and updating the menu. With enthusiasm in her eyes, she remarked, "We could do this." "Erica, really, do this. Take it as our own." So we did. I gave it my all, and together we transformed Maria's classic Italian eatery into something that was exclusively ours. We launched our second store across town 4 years later, occasionally strolling around our eateries and seeing how neatly everything operates. My family would be on my mind. It had been 11 years since that night. Mom kicked me out after slapping me. They had not left the city. Although we lived in different worlds, I was aware of it from sporadic peeks of Sarah's social media posts. Right now. One day, Jenny and I were surrounded by spreadsheets and plans for expansion in our office above the downtown site. As soon as we heard the group coming downstairs, Jenny looked over the booking calendar and remarked, "Looks like the engagement party is here." It should be a fun night with 50 people. When we first took over the business, we established this custom. We would approach consumers and ask for their opinions, give them a sense of exclusivity. It was among the characteristics that distinguished us from other locations. I put on my branded jacket and pinned my name badge on it saying, "I'll go check on them." You complete such contracts with vendors? As I made my way downstairs, the sound of clinking drinks and laughter grew louder. This kind of large gathering might result in repeat business, perhaps even more reservations for events. I put on my best business face and adjusted my badge. Then I caught sight of them. Sitting at the head table was my mother. Although her hair seemed grayer than I recalled, it was still groomed flawlessly. Somehow, Robert appeared beside her, looking the same, but older. Sarah, too. Sarah was holding hands with a man wearing a fancy suit while wearing a glittering outfit, the engagement celebration for my sister. I considered turning back for a moment, but before I could do so, Mom's eyes locked with mine, and I felt the recognition. "Look who it is then." With a loud announcement, she turned heads. "Tonight's waitress for us." A familiar grimace distorted Robert's face. "I'm still serving tables at the age of 30. I can't claim to be shocked." I started to say something, but my mother interrupted. With a tone full of satisfaction, she remarked, "I always knew you'd end up like this. Take a look at your sister, an economist in college who is marrying a great man, and you're still accepting orders while sporting a name tag." Squeezing her fiancé's hand, Sarah laughed. "Daddy, perhaps she will do our dishes tonight. Show us her unique abilities. The florist as well." Robert got to his feet, staggering a little. He must have had a few drinks. "Let's actually give her something to tidy up now. It went by so quickly." He snatched a salad dish from the table and threw it on the ground. Everyone jumped at the impact. I reached up to touch my cheek after feeling a searing sting. My fingers turned crimson. "Boops?" Robert looked at the blood streaming down my cheeks and grinned. "Waitress, you'd better get him up." As I stood there with a drip running down my cheek, my blood was boiling. I was ready to let out everything I had ever wanted to say to them, because 11 years of hurt and rage were building up inside of me. However, Jenny's voice broke the tension before I could say anything. She walked forward with the composed authority she had gained from her Aunt Maria, saying, "I think this situation requires immediate attention." She had our service agreement, which was leather-bound and included the gold-embossed emblem of our restaurant. In accordance with our service agreement, Jenny cleared her throat and spoke to the room. Section 3.2. Any patrons who physically or verbally assault our employees or property. She stopped thoughtfully and pointed to me, saying, "You will be taken off the property right away." Possession. Mom's jaw dropped. "What are you discussing? You knew, didn't you?" Was Jenny's grin incredibly piercing? "You're speaking with 3 people around the city, including co-owner Erica Thompson." The ensuing hush was deafening. As my mother gazed around the restaurant, I saw the color drain from her face, really took in the sophisticated customers, the tasteful decor, the framed evaluations on the walls, and all the success she had never bothered to find out about. "That is." Robert muttered, "That's impossible." But I could see the uncertainty slipping into his eyes. Jenny added that we retain the right to immediately stop service without providing a refund in situations of violence. She faced me. "It's your call, Erica." I recovered my voice, wiped the blood off my cheek with my sleeve, and straightened my blazer. "Make the tables clear." Our personnel was under my authority. Now all 50 guests must depart. The server quickly got to work clearing away the dishes and glasses. I heard the typical shriek at that moment. Robert's mother, Mrs. Henderson, gripped her spaghetti plate as if it were made of gold. "This is not possible." She screamed in the same manner that she used to pinch my cheeks and yell at me about table etiquette. "This is the engagement celebration for my son's daughter." She snatched back her dish as Miguel, one of our waiters, attempted to grab it, sending us flying. "Help! Help! I'm being attacked!" Robert staggered forward, fury purple in his cheeks. "Remove your hands from my mom." He moved in my direction, crinkled fists. Our security crew, however, was quicker. A third guard signaled that the cops were already en route, and 2 more moved to separate us. Sarah was crying uncontrollably. Her ideal engagement celebration was wrecked. "Mom, take action." Mom only stood there as she screamed. She looked lost, with mascara streaming down her cheeks. The lady who had thrown me out of my house and smacked me couldn't even look me in the eye anymore. There was mayhem for the next half hour. First on the scene were the police, who interviewed several witnesses who had captured everything on their phones. Still yelling threats, Robert was brought out in handcuffs. As guests streamed out, murmuring to each other, a paramedic cleaned and dressed the wound on my face before the ambulance came. 3 days after the event, my phone rang. Unknown figure. "Erica." "Please don't hang up," Mom said, her voice softer than it had been at the restaurant. I remained silent and waited. "Take a look at Robert. Charges are being brought by the police. You must let them go. This might cost him his job." "No," I said plainly, and ended the call. The assaults on social media started within hours. In her lengthy and emotional initial post, Mom accused a vengeful restaurant owner of ruining her beautiful daughter's engagement celebration, comments that expressed pity for her folks and vowed never to eat at our establishments. Sarah then contributed, writing about her insane stepsister, who was unable to tolerate her younger sister's happiness. Local community groups immediately saw the message. Jenny discovered me reading the falsehoods while glued to my phone. "We have it all on camera, don't you think?" Years ago, Maria installed a security system. When it notices violent motions or elevated shouts, it immediately captures audio and zooms in. The video was really clear. Every syllable was audible. Mrs. Henderson's yelling, the plate accident, Mom's insults, and Robert's threats. I sent a little remark in the comments section of Mom's tirade. This is what truly took place. Overnight, the video became viral. Other partygoers began uploading footage of their phones. Miguel's attempt to clear Mrs. Henderson's dish had been photographed from the ideal perspective. Her face twisted in anger, pasta sauce spraying in all directions. He never faltered in his professional composure. Just one video had millions of views. Drama in restaurants first gained popularity locally and later nationwide. The news was taken up by food bloggers. It made news when a family crashed an engagement party at their daughter's restaurant. Many readers shared their personal stories of toxic parenting and family alienation in the comment sections. The repercussions were immediate. Already humiliated by his incarceration, Robert's employer was unable to ignore the widely shared video of him attacking his stepdaughter at her place of employment. They shifted him to a lower place in silence. He was found guilty of assault and property damage by the court. Mom attempted to repair the damage by removing her posts, but screenshots were irreversible. Mrs. Henderson became a meme because Sarah's wedding venue canceled because she didn't want to be linked to a controversy. The woman who makes spaghetti. Her screamed face went viral on social media. Observing the surveillance footage's view count increase. I recalled a story I used to tell myself during the gloomy days following my mother's expulsion. Things would be different one day. I would have the opportunity to make amends with my family one day. They would strive to make amends after realizing their mistake. But even after all of their success and all of these years, I finally understood when I saw them in my restaurant that evening and saw them attempt to make fun of me. Certain things are unfixable. Not all bridges are intended for reconstruction. I kept the video pinned to my profile for reasons other than the fact that it turned out to be profitable. I left it there to serve as a reminder to myself and others that sometimes forgiveness and reunion aren't the key to a happy ending. Accepting that it's acceptable to go and never turn around is sometimes necessary.